Okay, so I have with me today Captain Emily Covais. She went to Regent University and joined the Army during it for us. There was a scholarship program, the HPSP.
Mhm.
Um, and so Emily, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and tell us kind of about who you are and what got you interested in psychology?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction, Daniel. Nice to meet you over video finally.
Yeah.
Like you said, I am now a captain in the U.S. Army in the internship portion of our program, so finishing out that 5th year. Uh, I started Regent University back in 2016, but prior to that, in undergrad, I got very interested in working in different service roles in Baltimore City, where I did my undergrad at Loyola University. In those roles, I was working a lot with the veteran population, and a lot of those individuals were experiencing difficulties with their mental health. So kind of in the very early years of my psychology degrees, I was very interested in working with the military. So I knew in order to work in a military capacity, either at a VA or active duty, I needed to have that higher level of education. So in pursuing where I wanted to go, even for graduate school, I was looking at military heavy populations, and Virginia Beach is a pretty big military town there, more so Navy, but lots of military folks across all branches are represented there. So when I started Regent, I definitely was looking for all of the experiences I could have with military, whether that practicum sites or asking for those types of patients in our student-run clinic. I was very much interested in learning more about that population. And as you mentioned, I did the Health Professional Scholarship or HPSP program. And it was a great entry to get to know a little bit more about what serving in active duty capacity would be like. So got some exposure to different resources through that program, and it's kind of what led me to my active duty roles, finishing up the PsyD degree.
Okay. You said what was the university you went to for undergrad?
Loyola University, Maryland.
Okay. There's a big, is that near Annapolis at all?
I think it's about an hour away. It's in Baltimore.
Okay. And is that, even with it being an hour away, is that kind of why you got some of the military population there?
There's a pretty large VA in Baltimore City proper.
Okay.
And just being in larger cities, you're going to have some more exposure to the homeless population. And, being in the Northeast, there are people from all walks of life that kind of flock to those cities. But the capacities I was working with them, those individuals were at food shelters and assistance for financial aid and education.
I
For
just
me, it was interesting.
I just talked a couple weeks ago with someone who's just finishing up their 3rd year, and he retired from the Navy. And he said while he was in the Navy, they went to a homeless shelter to do a comrail, like a community service type of event. And it was a veteran homeless shelter. And then when he saw all of his fellow, service members now as veterans and homeless, that's kind of what got him started in the whole trail of psychology. So that was kind of a, yeah.
I think for me as well, I have a big military family. I have aunts, cousins, uncles, grandparents that I've served. So even today, driving around San Antonia, which is where I'm located now, I see veterans holding up signs that say, homeless veterans need assistance. So it hits a little bit differently when you have that personal connection.
Yeah. What is it why did you decide for the Army instead of either the Navy or the Air Force?
A couple of things went into that decision. I have a couple of aunts that served in the Army, and extended family members that are also Army. So I wanted to follow in their footsteps a little bit. Another thing characteristically about me is I like to do the hard thing. So people say, you know, why did you join the Air Force? You can get paid the same and do the same job, but you don't have to do all of the ins and outs and more difficult things that the Army has to offer. But those are the things that I get excited about. I like being a soldier. I like doing PT.
Cool.
So those kinds of things led me to do the Army over other branches.
Okay. And when you had practica, so if I remember correctly, you had the 1-year scholarship.
Yes.
And so that helped you through your 4th year of school. When you had your 3rd or your 4th year practica sites, were you able to work with the military population or maybe at the VA in Hampton or anything like that?
So in my 3rd year, I had the practica site at Portsmouth Naval. So that's serving active duty Navy members. So I was very fortunate to be able to engage specifically in a military treatment facility in that way. COVID-19 hit halfway through that, so some of our care was pretty abruptly stopped in about March of 2020. So for 3rd year, I was able to do that. Even in my 2nd year working at the clinic on campus, I was always advocating for trying to get military members on my caseload. So I was in a couples clinic, and I was exposed to several couples working that were in the military. So that was very interesting. Lots of extra cultural layers there. But even I also worked at the psych hospital in Virginia Beach. And sometimes we would have active duty service members come through there. So in a lot of capacities, I was able to tap into that population.
You did a rotation through VB Psych, is that what it was? Oh, I didn't know they had. I didn't think that they would have active duty go through there.
So with inpatient, it's a little different because it's based on availability of beds and needs. So some service members would come through there for even just for a few days until beds would open up at the active duty sites.
Okay. Well. Yeah, my wife, she just started there like 2 weeks ago. So she just got finished orientation. So yeah.
It's a great site. Dr. Jensen, I believe, was our supervisor, and he's very good at teaching, educating. We get a lot of hours there too, which is great.
Yeah, she was talking about he's really into the personality. Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so typically your 5th year, so during your 4th year, you would do all of your internship applications and your what was that, cover letters and all these different, did you have to go through all of that?
Yes, so Regent has a pretty high standard, what I've noticed across the board for the internship application process. So being that I had the scholarship, I knew I was going to hopefully end up at an active duty site. Our program specifically requires us to apply to 15 different sites. So it's a lot to big extent, especially if you know you're trying to be a little bit more focused in the sites that you're looking at. So for the Army, there are only 4 active duty sites. So I applied to those. I applied to some of the VAs. I tried to keep it a little bit more local so the cost of traveling and all that was cut down. But I really focused my attention more specifically on the active duty Army sites. I know for other people that don't have a scholarship, they're able to apply to different branches for the military. So Air Force and Navy also have internship programs. So if you aren't locked into the Army, you're free to look into those other programs. But if I wasn't able to match to an active duty Army site, then I would have had to do a civilian internship and then roll into the Army after that.
Okay. And so did you end up getting one of the active duty Army sites?
Yes, so I'm
Okay.
currently at Brooke Army Medical Center at Fort Sam in San Antonio. It's the home of military medicine, so it's a big source of pride for our
Mm.
hospital. It was my top site. I loved the culture there. I loved the program director and just all of the staff and faculty there were very supportive, very focused on caring for you and developing you as an individual. And it was a great fit. It's been a great fit for me. And I'm really happy I was able to match there.
Yeah, you got your top site. So do you know Alexandra Lee now? But she might have been a year below you.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, she got her top site as well. So there seems
Mhm.
to be a recurring theme. Oh,
Yeah, a lot of people in our cohort got their top one or two, and I
oh,
think at least our year, a lot of people were very successful in the match and getting the places that they want. Of course, not everyone's going to get exactly where they want,
no.
but
That is
uh,
encouraging though.
most of us did get our top, one, two, or three slots. So
No.
um, the program does do a good job in preparing you for being successful with your interview process and also with the training that you get.
Mm.
Um, I've noticed that in my experiences.
Yeah. And so, not that pay is a big deal, but usually on internship, you get a little bit of a payment, if you're a civilian. Does your military service start after internship or during internship?
No, so before you even get to internship, you go to a direct commissioning course, at least with the Army. So that's about a month-long training where you're kind of exposed to some different military customs and courtesies. You're in process into the active duty side of being in the military.
You get a
Um,
uniform, stuff like that?
mhm.
Okay.
We were wearing uniforms. We did a range day. We did a land navigation training
Oh, wow.
and more things, but which is we call it COVID DCC. So it was very much scaled back. We had to quarantine in our rooms and take a bunch of COVID tests and
Wow.
that. And did online learning. So it was a little bit of a different experience. But that first day when you show up to military training, you put your hand up, you say the oath, you're in uniform, you're serving the country.
Okay, and it starts then.
It starts then.
Okay.
So you do acquire what we call an ADSO. So the military is technically training you for your internship year, and if you decide to do a residency or postdoc, you're essentially anytime you're in training status, you acquire additional years on the contract that you sign. Um, so for me, because I'm in training this year and I'll roll into a postdoc type of position next year, it'll be 2 years of training. And that kind of gets tacked on to the amount of time that I said I would be in the military for. So you're serving, you're counting these years towards your 20 in service if you want to retire. You're wearing the uniform to work every day,
Oh,
all that good stuff.
okay. What, so for you, it would have been during your fourth year that you started. And then you're saying, so in order for the scholarship, for doing a 1 year scholarship, how many years did you promise to serve minimum?
So when you sign the scholarship, they kind of account that ADSO time in the time that you go back to the military for that. Our contracts have been a little bit unclear as to when that time gets to start being paid back.
Okay.
Sometime right before my year, it was after your license, then your time starts getting paid back. So if you got licensed real early, then
Hmm.
you could start that time paying back sooner.
Okay.
But for us, it's after you're done training. So after we are done postdoc is when our time to pay that back starts. I think it's about 5 years total because I have the scholarship. So that time in service starts now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm planning on doing the full 20. So full disclosure, I haven't really looked at all the fine print with that.
Right.
So that's my recollection. I know there's been some conversations among our cohort of people that have had the scholarship and how long do we actually have to be in the military for. But a unique piece of contracts when you're an officer, you don't sign, you sign a day that says this is how long I'll be here for. But as an officer, you have to ask permission to leave. It's not like an enlisted service member that says my contract starts on the 21st of April. We're done, 3 years later on that same day. As an officer, the rules are a little bit different.
Oh, interesting.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, from your own personal experience, you mentioned that you got your top site. How has your internship year been?
It's been wild. It's great. I regularly say, I'm just happy to be here, happy to be at Brooke Army Medical Center. I feel very fulfilled in the roles that I'm able to do. I've been working towards this for 9 years, right?
Yeah.
So, it's been a long time coming. I think the faculty, like I said, they're really supportive, really great. You work with a lot of different supervisors. There's a lot of opportunities to get exposed to different experiences. On rotation, you're working with trainees, so students in AIT or advanced individual training, pretty new, right out of basic, new to the Army, but you're working across branches too. So Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, Marines. We don't have any Space Force members yet.
Yeah.
The Guardians, but we see a lot of different people across branches. So it's a big learning curve to figure out what all the rules and regulations are, how their commands work. But it's been a really good experience so far. Great training, lots of CDP training. So we learned how to do like military specific trainings for like, pain, insomnia, prolonged exposure, and cognitive processing therapy. Those have been the ones that we've had more formalized trainings on. So we're always in a training.
Yeah. I was wondering if they would. I heard from Dr. Rowan specifically that the Air Force is CBT heavy, and I was wondering if the Army was also just CBT heavy, like let's just do CBT, or if they also incorporated into like ACT and other forms. So that's good.
Yeah, they tend to. So the military likes evidence-based treatments. In his experience for Dr. Rowan, it was a lot of CBT. But as long as you're using research to fuel your clinical work, your presentation, your treatment, that's what, in my experience, has been widely accepted. With ACT kind of being that third wave, a little more ambiguous in how it's implemented. But I've had supervisors that lean more psychodynamic in their approach. And I've had supervisors that are very CBT heavy. So it just kind of depends. I feel like there is more flexibility than I thought going into the military of what we're able to use, what we're able to implement treatment. So I've really appreciated that.
Good. When you said some of your supervisors lean psychodynamic, would that be like PLDP or ITP, that realm, like short term?
It's more in how they conceptualize the patient, I would say. My current supervisor works a lot in the psychodynamic and with the ACT realm. I was a little confused at how that works before I had the ACT training, and then I had the ACT training, and I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. So it's interesting to be exposed to those different things. So there's not a specific type of, like, I'm not doing TLDP with patients, but just how we think about patients, and maybe some of the questions that we ask as well.
Okay. You mentioned that you've enjoyed your role. What kind of roles have you played during internship?
Yeah, lots of roles. we wear lots of hats. So your first role actually when you join the military, when you join the Army specifically, is you're a soldier first.
Okay.
So again, that's one of the reasons why I joined. I love being a soldier. I love, the physical components of things that we have to do. I love that I get to work with soldiers. They're a breed. And that cultural piece really plays an influence in your clinical work. So soldier, clinician, we do a lot of assessment as a clinician, whether that's formalized through testing for psychodiagnostic reasons. And then also we do this other component unique to psychologists in the military is looking at fitness for duty. We work closely with social workers and they also do some of those assessments too. But assessment's kind of the key component of our role as psychologists. So we're always looking to see, is this person fit for duty? Can they carry out their soldier tasks? Can they be deployed or not? And then if not, how do we help them get the care that they need, whether it's referring for like helping with physical ailments, or if they need more intense behavioral health care, or if they need behavioral health referral. We're doing a lot of navigating that space. We provide therapy, and then we're also acting a lot of times as a consultant to commanders to say, we have some concerns about this particular individual, or they might call us and say, I have some concerns about what's going on with this soldier. What can I do? Can I refer them for an evaluation, or what can I do to get them help? And I've been very encouraged in my experiences of how open the commanders are with communicating with behavioral health, really want to make that a priority for their soldiers. And then the flexibility that they've had in allowing them to come to appointments too. I've been really encouraged by that.
Good. Yeah, I know one of the I don't know, hesitancies that maybe an active duty service member might face when seeing a active duty psychologist is that everything they say is not as confidential as if it were a civilian psychologist. Is that right?
So confidentiality is something I take very seriously, obviously as an ethical psychologist and training, and even after I'm done training. But it's something I spend a lot of time going over with my patients when I come into treatment. Generally, the same principles apply when you're going to see a civilian provider, right? If you present a harm to yourself or others, if you report abuse to a child, elder person, someone that can't take care of themselves, your records are to be subpoenaed by a court, right? The other layers to it are there other things that, as a behavioral health provider or other type of providers, you want to make sure that your patients are being safe. So if there's reports of excessive alcohol or substance use, there's a specific clinic, and that's branch specific, to refer to that service member to, so they can help with detoxing or getting more education about their substance use. If they don't show up for their appointments, and that's across not just behavioral health, but any kind of medical appointment. If you don't show up to your appointments, it comes down through your command, and your command's notified that you didn't show up to your appointment. Yeah. So the piece of what is my supervisor, what are my commanders going to know? It really comes down to that accountability. Okay. Were you at your appointment or not? They don't have access to what your diagnosis is, or what they talk about in treatment. If you're able to talk with your command and say, I just have an appointment, sometimes they don't even get information beyond that based on what you tell them. Okay. And how agreeable they are to that or not. Uh-huh. There are instances where the commander will refer somebody to behavioral health for an evaluation, or if they're trying to separate an enlisted member, for example, through a specific channel, and they want to make sure that they're clear from a behavioral health perspective, to separate them for a couple of different reasons. So in those instances, when a commander is referring somebody to treatment, that's when confidentiality is a little bit different. And that's also explained before the service member engages in that type of evaluation.
Okay. So that's encouraging. That's kind of what I had in mind. And
Yeah.
would you say that, let's say they bring up maybe a substance abuse problem and you're going to refer them to the substance abuse center, whatever it might be. If they it always looks better if you kind of self-refer yourself. If you get a referral from your psychologist and you go, does that look better on you versus, if you refer them and then they don't go, do you then have to intervene or?
Yeah, so you're touching on a really good topic there. If you self-refer, obviously it's going to be better for you. And this is just from my very limited understanding, if they don't follow up with that care, it's a conversation in treatment, and it might be more of a formalized referral then, and at that point, command might be involved.
Okay, that makes sense.
If there needs to be more formalized referral.
Yeah. And so in what direction do you have kind of a specialized direction in mind where you're heading, or you just want to be a generalist, or kind of what are you thinking there?
Yeah, for so long, when people would ask me that question and at Regent or even in undergrad, what do you want to do? I want to do military psychology, right?
Yeah.
You get to the military and they're like, what do you want to do? But I've really found that going through the regulations and understanding what is needed from our job in kind of being that person that's a liaison between behavioral health and working with commands. I really love that kind of aspect of our job. Okay. And then follow up with the assessing fitness for duty. Our BHO position. So we do internship and residency at one spot, then we do 2 or 3 year BHO or behavioral health officer type of set of orders, and then we can apply while we're there to go do a fellowship to specialize, as we're saying. There's a new one in the Army called assessment and selection, and that's working more with, again, from my understanding, and it is still new, that's working more with special groups and helping to assess if people are suited for those types of positions. So be working with 3-letter agencies or special forces and things like that.
Cool. So you're saying, let's see, if you want to specialize in that, and I know it's a new thing, is that something that takes place after postdoc?
Yes. So the language kind of changes a little bit too when you're in the military, right? So we call it behavioral health, not mental health, and that's a shift. And how we just decide where you are at in your training is a little bit different too. So our postdoc is our residency year, which is right after internship. It's great. You don't have to reapply for a postdoc. You can just stay on to your site, which is.
Okay, so you get to stay at Brooke Medical Center? Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Yeah. And most of the sites do the same thing too, if not all of them, where you just stay on. In some instances, I guess you could try to do it at another medical center or forego it, but that's more uncommon and not recommended. So then you do your 2 years of training, you go through the behavioral health billet, and then you go ahead and if you want to, stay in and apply for a fellowship, there's 1 and 2 year fellowships. So there's trauma, there's child, assessment and selection, neuropsychology, health psychology. I might be missing 1 or 2 more, but
still a pretty good range. Yeah. And so then you would apply. Let me get this right. It's a 2-year training for if you did assessment and selection would be a 2-year program?
So that one, I think, is a 2-year fellowship. So that would be at a different, I think they're putting it up in DC somewhere.
Okay.
Very, very formalized in DC somewhere. But yeah, so that would be a 2-year. You go back into training status. At that point, you're likely to be a major or up for a major. So you're sitting in training status you're still working, but you're in training. And then you accrue a little bit more of that ADSO time. So because they're training you, then you have to owe a little bit more time to that training as well. Typically done after your behavioral health officer position.
Wow, there's so many. That's one of the things. There's so many great training opportunities with the.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Man, and that would be. I think that would be really cool to be, especially like you said with special forces or something, and then people who sign up and then you do the assessment for them. Do you know? This is still very new, but do you know? Would that also entail like we give maybe like the MMPI or the IQ test, or when we do like a full battery? Do they have maybe specific testing?
I'm not quite sure. From my, again, limited experience on internship, and to give out like PAIs for personality.
Okay.
Because we have the scoring for that, and the MMPI is more expensive. But there's a whole bunch of different tests. I don't know what that specific fellowship's going to use. And it depends on the clinic too and the availability of resources. So I've had some clinics where we're using the MMPI or not. Same with the AI. A lot of times it's a really good clinical interview. And, kind of learning from people that were in those positions before. These are the types of profiles that we're looking at. The types of concerns that we don't think would be appropriate for this role. But again, the fellowship in and of itself is new as far as the training component of it. But there are psychologists and other professionals working in these capacities already. So just gaining access to them and kind of talking to them would be probably helpful for me. For anyone listening to kind of understand what that is a little bit more.
And so for you personally, I remember coming into the program and before I even knew much about it, I didn't know assessment was a thing for us. And then I talked with a first year recently and she said the same thing. And we talked about how the assessment courses were they were the most difficult, but also the most rewarding. I feel like we learned so much from each assessment course we took. When you took maybe IQ or personality, did you love the assessment portions back then? And that no? Okay.
I might out myself a little bit here, but half the time I didn't really understand what was going on in the classes. Came out on the other end of it a little bit more understanding of what was happening. But for me, it really clicked. The more you do it and the more exposure you have to giving the tests and using them with patients, that's when it really starts to click for you and you can start seeing some of those patterns and it feels less daunting when you have examples from your own clinical work to use. So I didn't, and I talk with my TA from those classes and she's like, yeah, you were, not that I was bad at them, but she's like, you were having a good time, you didn't like those classes. But I think for me, it really clicked when I could see the clinical utility of it. And I wasn't just in class writing reports on reports on reports. And once you're out of the program too, you have different supervisors that have different approaches to working with the assessments too. Not to say that it's not standardized because it should be and needs to be standardized, but how you write it up and how you approach using the data can be better explained by other people that you encounter.
Yeah. So that's encouraging for anyone who's listening and they hated assessment courses. You might end up loving it one day, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of assessments. You're exposed to a good amount at Regent, but I think as you're exposed to different ones in different settings, you'll kind of figure out which ones you get the data that you want to have and use that data, and it'll click more for you. But I think, yeah, the more that you're exposed to it, the better you'll feel using it, the more comfortable you'll be giving it, and get better buy-in from being with that.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I also, it seems that throughout this, Regent's main setup is it's a 5-year program, 5th year's internship. And for a lot of people I talk with, it's a very difficult program. It's very stressful. So for you, did you find it being a very stressful program, and was it hard to deal with it, or did you find things that helped you cope with it, or what worked for you, or what was your experience like?
Let's see. So my experience, I think, was unique in some aspects to my cohort, and then I think our cohort's experience was unique. So I worked full time throughout my entire time at Regent.
Wow.
That wasn't something that was encouraged.
No.
To support myself, I worked over at the Founders Inn, which is a hotel restaurant on campus. So they're good once I got a good boss. They're flexible with my schedule, so I worked a lot of nights and weekends. But it was a lot. But having that community outside of Regent was really helpful to me. Having that didn't talk psychology all the time.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that my cohort didn't absolutely 100% get me through that program. I think finding your people is something that is the make or break for a lot of people. It was for me. And as you go throughout the program, sometimes those people change. It might change on who you're on practical with. And when you get into the 3rd and 4th year classes, you're not all in the same classes. You might be taking 1 or 2 that are a little bit different. So for me, really finding those people that I could work on my dissertation with, or study for comps with, or I picked up rock climbing between my 2nd and 3rd year.
Oh, cool.
So that was a really big coping skill for me. If I had a few hours, I would go out for runs. First Landing State Park was let's get away from any kind of technology, screens, people talking at me, talking with me, and just kind of getting out in nature. That was a really big coping skill for me. So I think those types of things aligned really well with my values of staying physically fit, being outside and appreciating the things that are around. I mean, I would get off work at BB Psych and go for a run on the beach. It's like 6 minutes away. It was so I think really just capitalizing on the things that were around us is really important.
Yeah, good. Yeah, very wide range. You're the first person I've talked with that has been able to maintain a full-time job throughout this program. So that's very impressive.
It's not easy. And sleep.
Have you read any books on military psychology?
So we were tasked recently with looking up leadership, military leadership, and how to kind of navigate those spaces, because leadership's a big piece of the military officership. So I'm going to be reading a book about it's David Goggins. Some would argue that he's a good military leader, not a leader, or a bad one, so I'm gonna figure out
Okay.
my own opinions about that. But I think he's motivational. Um, but did I read anything specific? Books? No. Lots of articles though. My dissertation was on active duty military psychology, so
Oh, really?
yeah, I looked at sex differences between men and women who are receiving behavioral health care while on active duty in the Air Force. And I looked at initial symptom distress, treatment completion, and career impacts. If there are any differences between men and women.
What was your main takeaway, your finding?
So men and women were coming to care around the same levels of distress, finishing around the same levels, or like dropping out of care as well. And then we had a finding that was almost significant. It was like 0.054. I was like, no. But in that it was men were almost significantly more likely to get a career impacting recommendation than women. So
I wonder what that's due to.
Yeah. There'll be a lot of things.
Yeah.
Their roles in the military, how they're perceived.
That's interesting though that they both present behavioral health around the same level of distress that I would think typically men would be more, they would wait longer, right? So that's cool. That's good. The Air Force is doing something right.
Yeah, I dug into a lot of the research about, what is the military as a whole doing to address the stigma of behavioral health. So they're doing a lot. And I would say even my experiences in my clinical practice, most of my caseload are males.
Good. No. All right. I think that's it. Unless you have anything you want to add or say.
Sure. I appreciate you reaching out and wanting to connect and pick my brain about these things. For the Regent family out there, right? It's a hard program. I really do believe it trains you well to be good ethical psychologists. The days are long, the years are long, but once you get out there, from my experience and people that I've also been talking with in my cohort, other cohorts, everyone has kind of come back with the same conclusion that although Regent was really hard, they trained really well.
Good.
And along that same vein of the program is hard, take those moments to celebrate those things. Celebrate when you get your master's because it's highly booked. Celebrate when you finish classes or pass a really hard probe. Take those to connect with each other and take pictures of those things too, so you can remember the things that happen.
Yeah.
And then to anyone that's kind of looking towards doing a military psychology career, it's really important to get to know what you're getting yourself into. So feel free, if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can give them my contact information. Just talk to people who are in those roles and get to know a little bit more about the different branches if you're interested in that. There's a lot out there, a lot of really great training opportunities, but when you do join the military, it's bigger than you think. The role of being an active duty psychologist holds a lot more responsibility than a civilian counterpart might. So it can be heavy, it can be a lot of pressure at times, but for me, it's really been worth it.
Good. That's good to hear. And yeah, it's been extremely informative talking with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. Well, I did think of one last thing. Oh, I really appreciate you two talking about celebrating the small moments. We joked about having a commencement ceremony for our masters.
Yes.
But with all of that, if you could go back, looking back on your coming out on the other side of this whole program, would you change anything that you did, or are you working full time, everything that you did, would you keep it kind of the same? I mean, it worked for you really well, so.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, would I do anything different? I probably would have taken more time to celebrate things. And that's kind of why I was saying that there
Yeah.
are moments that, it's just like, okay, I gotta get through this day, gotta get through this class, gotta get through, and there are gonna be days like that. I think when you have that mentality going in and day out for years, it's a lot. I mean, like, take a vacation. I couldn't go home for a lot of holidays because of the nature of my work. We had to work these, but taking those times to, I think, celebrate your accomplishments, but also celebrate with those people that you really care about.
Yeah.
I think I would do that part of it differently.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Good.
I would have slept more too, but
Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate you meeting with me, and
yeah,
I wish you the best of
absolutely.
luck in your postdoc and everything to come in your military
Thank you.
career.
I appreciate it too. Feel free to reach out anytime, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.